I am a beast, a stray, that finds neither home nor joy nor nourishment in a world that is strange and incomprehensible. And these were the words of the protagonist, Harry Haller, in Steppenwolf, a man who was trapped between two worlds. The worlds of the middle class, the wealthy middle class, the bourgeoisie, to which he couldn't enter in some way. He couldn't find the satisfaction or the entry points into that world, even though in many ways he wanted to. What we'd call, I suppose, this idealistic kind of upper middle class good life, the gated community, the good parties, the nice restaurants, that kind of thing. And he was trapped between wanting that and also a feeling that he was an outsider, a lone wolf prowling around in solitude, lonely, and couldn't really feel part of the society in which he was born. So I mention that because you're standing outside the supermarket like I was. It must have happened to you at some point. I was waiting there outside, just by the entrance. I was waiting for somebody to come out. And I felt quite peculiar. And I sort of saw a kind of bleak vision of humanity, to which my conclusion was that this isn't the sort of place that you should really bring a new life into. Now, of course, one has to rationalize these feelings if you ever get them, because it's not really helpful to think like that. It's not a very good coping strategy. It was like I could see through a lot of the myth and the stories and the romance just in those few minutes standing outside a Lidl. There were a number of young women who entered the shop while I was standing there, who quite typically for this city had had quite serious amounts of Botox, and their lips were extended and they were covered in makeup. And to me it looked very alien. Now, it's not for me to judge what somebody else does, but it looked strange and weird. It didn't look normal, and yet you see this everywhere now. And I thought, well, you know, what's behind that? What's behind that phenomena of young women changing their appearance in a way that appears to me to be peculiar at best? I mean, at the very least, you can say that it does mean that they weren't happy with themselves as they were before. There were men in ill-fitting shorts, some of them quite severely overweight, flip-flops, stained t-shirts that were far too small for them, the sort of people who if you catch their eye, you feel they may come over and they'll either say, "What are you looking at?" or they'll just strike you. They look like men who are looking for trouble. They look like men who are angry already. They move into the day angry. Some of these people who were entering the supermarket were completely oblivious to the surroundings. They were shouting into their phones, which they were holding up to their face. Now, the microphone is only 6 inches away. It's an omnidirectional microphone that can easily pick up a voice, even if you speak like this. And yet they were shouting. You could have heard them at 100 meters away. I was only 4 or 5 meters away, and I thought it was an imposition. They were bumping into each other. They were bumping into doors. They weren't looking. There was little old ladies who were sort of getting out of their way. So there were these kind of peculiar, weird, strange-looking women, these aggressive-looking men, and people who were moving like military vehicles, deciding to destroy anything in its path, walking into doors. In front of where I was standing, there was a large pile of these electric city scooters. Some were standing, some had been knocked over or had been abandoned on the ground. A lot of people were too lazy to go to Lidl, and they'd ordered walk drivers to pick up their food for them, even though they only live in the local area, within 2, 3, 5 minutes, 10 minutes max. We know that because the walk drivers only pick up from the local supermarkets for local delivery. They don't deliver across the city. So if you live in the catchment area of this Lidl, you organise a walk driver. All of the walk drivers here are immigrants. All of them. There are probably 500 working in the city, maybe more. They're all immigrants. And they're all servicing the local indigenous, shall we say, population, the people who were born here, who can't be bothered to leave their apartments and go to Lidl for some reason. They're prepared to pay the €5 delivery fee. So the entrance was crowded with these electric scooters, which they use for deliveries here. These are not bikes. These are not e-bikes. These are very large, they're kind of like electric motorbikes. It's a slightly grey area, but they inhabit and have taken over the bicycle paths. Standing around on the gravel and the tarmac were fledgling seagulls, young seagulls fighting for life. These were the young of who had recently left the nest and were kind of in a fairly vulnerable situation because they kind of had to survive on their own for the first time without really the ability to or the confidence to be able to fly. So it's a very precarious time. The fledglings were in different stages. Some of them looked slightly more confident than others. The reason they were hanging around there was twofold. One, because there's no green. There's a few patches here and there, but generally all the green is gone. And also because with the lack of grass and that kind of thing, they're better off trying to feed off the scraps and the dropped half-eaten sandwiches that you're likely to get outside a supermarket. I saw a couple of hares that dived out of a little green bush that was in the distance. And they ran for their lives, no doubt looking for another green bush. The reason that they were running for their lives is because there was a couple of boys, maybe 12, who decided that they would intimidate them. And I felt in these few minutes that I was looking at something like a horror show. It felt like the sort of place that as I said, I wouldn't want to introduce a new life to it. I couldn't find any characteristics that made me feel good about life. The question is, I suppose, is this a sign of a depression? Or is this as a sign of seeing through the myths and stories and romantic ideas we have about what life is? We know what those things are. Those are the stories we have inherited. They're the stories we've grown up in. We know what they are. We believe that we can find salvation through love, through money, through work, that there is a way to find salvation in some way. I think that those things are stories, and we're living in a kind of unreal society. The reality is that once born, we simply have to adopt coping strategies. And all of these beliefs we have are a form of coping strategy, and they're also forms of coping strategy that people capitalise on. Now, who are the people who capitalise on it? Well, everybody capitalises on it to some extent. But if the world is a sort of troubled place, and you have the ability, then you're going to seek an enclave of some sort. An enclave for the wealthy, an enclave for the rich, an enclave for anybody who can afford it, a gated community. Who lives in these gated communities? Now, when I say gated communities, think of that as a metaphor, but you know what I mean. Who lives in the nicer parts of town? The plastic surgeons, the Botox guys, they'll be there. The insurance executives, the men who lend the money to the people who live outside the enclave. And then who manufacture the trinkets for them. See, the problem is that everybody's looking for something outside of themselves, for some kind of salvation that comes from this material world, and by and large they're not going to find it. They're not going to find it because the only real reality is within us. Let me give you an example. Many people, when they think of escape, they think of travel, holidays, breaks. Let's get away from here. If I was there, things would be wonderful. If I was over there in this place, here's a picture of it. If I was there, everything would be okay. Everything would be much better. But the problem is that if you've got a postcard of somewhere, a metaphorical postcard even, of somewhere that in your imagination or on the photograph looks like a utopian paradise, it looks beautiful, it looks peaceful, it looks calm, it looks secure. The problem is that when you are there, when you are in that picture, the flesh and blood, then it's lost its appeal. So you're running and you're running and you're running, but there's nowhere for you to go. Because as soon as you appear in that picture, I'm afraid you're back to the sort of torturous flesh and blood reality. The same old psychological issues that you have to carry around with you. I would say that that the best thing to do is not to look at the world through the medium of kind of other people's theories or ideas or mythologies, because I think it all comes down to coping strategies. I mean, think about it. You're pushed into the world. You didn't ask to be born. You're here. You know it's a struggle for survival. I mean, very few of us, I don't think anybody actually is immune from that. At some point the horror will come. But just to kind of, just look with your own, just look around with your own eyes. Just watch what happens. Become a participant observer. It's a good education in a way. So observe, but participate as well, because you can't seclude yourself. You can't isolate yourself. That's very unhealthy. And of course, once you enter the world, you will become surprised. But you won't become surprised because anybody has found out the answer. You'll become surprised because everybody has a story. A story to tell that explains the Botox, explains the drinking, explains the drugs, explains the anger, explains the fact that they're struggling. And those stories will help you understand, I think, that this world is a world of coping strategies. And those are the things that you should master, not the myths and the stories and the beliefs about how wealth, power, money, another place, another country, another town, another woman, another man, another dog, whatever, another flat, somehow will be the answer. But I do feel that it's important to kind of not to go down a blind alley with this and sort of find yourself in a corner. You do need to engage, I think, with the world as it really is. But there's no point in deluding yourself. Now, it might be that the next time I go and stand outside Lidl and I'm waiting for somebody, I'll see things from a different perspective.